Our next speaker is Molly Chamberlain. Molly has really done an exceptional job in this program, just really did everything the absolute right way in terms of being a classmate, being a student here. Molly's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, and she's from Annapolis, Maryland. And she was on the rowing team while at the U.S. Naval Academy. So her college experience was probably very, very different from mine. Rolling out of bed around noon, going to class when I couldn't get away with not going to class. So Molly had a very different experience and has shown amazing leadership in this program and has taken on a topic about heat vulnerability that I think many people forget is insanely important. Morbidity and mortality from heat-related illness and heat-related trauma is something that has already begun and something that could really accelerate with climate change. So Molly has taken on a really important issue with her capstone. She did an internship with the city of San Diego. And the title of Molly's project is Heat Resilience Planning in San Diego, Local Plans, Barriers, and Tools to Facilitate Strategic Implementation. Molly, it's all you.
Okay, thank you so much, Corey. Hi, I'm Molly Chamberlain, and today I'll be presenting my research on heat resilience planning in San Diego, local plans, barriers, and tools to facilitate strategy implementation. For my agenda today, I'll be going over the heat in the context of climate change and urban heat, health impacts in San Diego. I'll provide an overview of heat resilience planning and discuss some of San Diego's heat resilience plans. And I'll present my project objectives, discuss my survey that I conducted with the city and ArcGIS maps that I created, and conclude with recommendations. So heat is a major impact of climate change, and heat waves are expected to increase in frequency and intensity as global temperatures continue to rise. Urban environments are particularly vulnerable to these impacts due to the urban heat island effect, which occurs due to the amount of non-reflective heat-absorbing materials that make up our cities. Urban planners play an important role in the integration of and implementation of heat resilience strategies into local plans. And according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the outlook for cities in the lens of extreme heat is not promising without integrated adaptation measures. Recent events such as the Pacific Northwest heat dome that occurred in July of 2021 pushed the upper limits of heat resilience and exposed vulnerabilities in our heat response and resilience planning. The figure to the left depicts different temperature projections for California, showing the change in average maximum temperature for different emission scenarios. And in San Diego, temperatures can increase by as much as 4 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit under a moderate emission scenario and 7 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit under a high emission scenario by the end of the century. Heat is the deadliest climate-related cause of death, though it can be prevented in many scenarios with effective planning and response measures, which require coordination across sectors. Heat-related illness and death occurs when the body is not able to sufficiently cool itself, which causes the body temperature to rise and can damage vital organs, such as the brain. The figure on the left shows warning signs of heat exhaustion and heat stroke is a severe medical condition that can lead to death. Heat can also worsen pre-existing conditions for many people, such as cardiovascular and respiratory conditions, and those most at risk include older adults, young children and infants, and those experiencing chronic disease and mental illness. Additionally, lack of air conditioning may exacerbate heat impacts. In San Diego, it consists of very diverse climate zones and regions that experience different levels of heat vulnerability and risk. Heat susceptibility impacts are seen at higher rates and at lower temperatures on the coast of San Diego. And this is likely due to these residents being less adjusted to the heat and also having less air conditioning prevalence in the region. Additionally, daily minimum temperatures, which are achieved at night, are increasing, which provides less relief to residents, especially those who don't have access to air conditioning. And as heat waves grow longer and more intense, this lack of relief can worsen health impacts. So next, I'll discuss heat resilience strategies, but before that, I'm going to quickly define the term resilience. And this definition was adapted from the IPCC and is the ability of systems to cope with and respond to a hazardous event while maintaining the capacity for adaptation, learning, and transformation. A recent report from the American Planning Association on urban heat resilience talks about two different types of strategies, which are heat management and heat mitigation. Heat management strategies typically fall in the realm of public health and disaster management and are more response-based strategies such as educational campaigns, warning and notification systems, heat action plans, increasing access to cool zones and cooling centers, as well as indoor cooling resources. And cool zones are typically public facilities such as recreation centers or libraries that provide free air conditioning during heat events. And heat mitigation strategies include urban design and planning strategies, which are typically take longer to implement than the heat management. And these include increasing the urban tree canopy, implementing green roofs, implementing urban greening programs, and implementing cool pavements and cool roofs. So green roofs consist of a layer of vegetation on a rooftop, and cool roofs typically consist of a reflective paint coating or shingles. Cool pavement is a lighter colored coating that typically reflects sunlight and can increase the pavement's albedo or reflectivity. And these strategies are all effective for reducing temperature in Mediterranean climates such as San Diego, and can be implemented in combination with each other in order to help maximize cooling and other co-benefits. Some best practices for effectively implementing integrated heat resilience strategies include coordination across sectors and climate change hazards, creating metrics to monitor and test the effectiveness of these strategies over time, and additionally, an integral component of planning that will help to understand heat impacts in different neighborhoods is community outreach. So the City of San Diego's Climate Resilient San Diego Plan, which was approved in December of 2021, includes a range of heat resilience strategies, including expanding access to cool zones, maintaining and expanding the city's urban tree canopy, installing cool pavements on city streets, incentivizing installation of cool and green roofs, and developing an urban program to promote expanded green spaces. The city's climate action plan and the county's multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan and the county's excessive heat response plan also include some related heat resilience strategies that are applicable to the San Diego area, but for this project, I focus specifically on the city and the Climate Resilient San Diego report. And hopefully, some of the recommendations and processes from this project can be integrated throughout regional plans to establish more coordinated planning efforts. So with that introduction and background, it brings me to my project objectives, which include understanding current local San Diego heat resilience plans and policies, which I did through my research, identifying barriers that City of San Diego planners face in implementing heat resilience strategies, understanding City of San Diego planners' current use of related tools and what heat resilience strategies they believe should be prioritized, and also developing a tool that will help the city implement heat resilience strategies as stated in the Climate Resilient San Diego plan to achieve the most effective outcomes. So to meet these objectives, I created a survey that was given to the City of San Diego Planning Department, and there was a 34% response rate on the survey. When asked what type of heat related planning tools planners use in current projects, 42% said that they use tree canopy or vegetation maps. 50% of respondents said they felt somewhat comfortable utilizing interactive tools such as ArcGIS maps to make planning decisions. And 65% of respondents said that increasing tree canopy should be the #1 strategy to be prioritized. Funding, time and staff, and leadership were identified as the top significant barriers to heat resilience planning, and coordination between agencies and jurisdictions, as well as available data and tools on extreme heat risk, were identified as the top moderate barriers. And lastly, the tool that was identified that would help to facilitate heat resilience planning in San Diego was a visualization tool about heat-related impacts to identify communities most at risk. So I found the responses about the significant and moderate barriers to be most helpful in directing my research. And with the fiscal year 2023 budget for the city recently approved, which includes the addition of a chief resiliency officer in the next fiscal year, as well as funding for resiliency efforts, I think it can be really interesting to see how these answers might change if the same question was asked with regards to barriers of funding, time and staff, and leadership in the next 1 to 2 years. And for the moderate barriers of coordination between agencies and jurisdictions, this is an area for the city to look into further to identify opportunities that currently exist or don't exist to further collaboration between local agencies to advance heat resilience planning. So the survey results were taken into consideration when designing a tool for City of San Diego planners, and I decided on ArcGIS maps as they're a user-friendly and interactive platform, and I also created a separate ArcGIS story map for city planners. And a large portion of the maps that I'll go over are bivariate maps in order to compare heat susceptibility to other variables. So maps that were created include factors of heat susceptibility, both day and night, cool zone distance, tree canopy coverage, impervious surface coverage, and combined scores. And for the map scoring, quartiles were calculated for the different data sets and grouped accordingly, and then scores of 1 to 4 correlated with 1 being low and 4 being high. And for the sake of time today, I'll just be going over my daytime heat susceptibility maps. So this first map provides a viewer with a spatial overview of the distribution of cool zones throughout the city and can allow someone to identify zip codes that may be lacking in cool zones. And this map corresponds with the Climate Resilient San Diego Plan goal of expanding access to cool zone throughout the city. Cool zone distance was measured from each population-weighted centroid, which is the black dot in each zip code. And in the interactive form of this map, you're able to click on the blue tab for each cool zone to see more information about it. So this next map is a bivariate map that displays daytime heat susceptibility and cool zone distance by zip code. And users can utilize the legend to identify what cool zone or what zip codes should be a priority for implementing cool zones, which would be those with the darkest shades of color on the map, which represent high daytime heat susceptibility and high distance to cool zones. In the interactive form of this map, you can also click on the zip code to see the scores for each variable. And within these priority zip codes that are identified, additional outreach can be conducted to determine ways to make cool zones more desirable and accessible places for people to visit during heat events, as well as outreach for programs such as the free electric fan program and free rides to cool zones provided through the county. This next map displays daytime heat susceptibility and tree canopy coverage by zip code. And again, zip codes with the darker shades can be prioritized for tree planting due to high daytime heat susceptibility and a high amount of area without a tree canopy coverage. And these maps could be used to integrate with the urban forestry 5-year plan, as well as with the urban tree canopy assessment that the city has. And increasing the urban tree canopy, again, was the top strategy that planners believe should be prioritized, and it also represents the largest volume of related strategies in the Climate Resilient San Diego Plan and across the Climate Action Plan. This next map displays daytime heat susceptibility and impervious surface cover by zip code, and impervious surfaces include those such as roads, asphalt, driveways, and parking lots that are not permeable and typically retain heat, which can exacerbate the urban heat island effect. And strategies to reduce impervious surface cover include urban greening, cool pavement application, implementation of cool and green roofs, so all of those strategies that are in the Climate Resilient San Diego Plan, and this map can identify priority areas for those to be implemented. And another way this map could be utilized is to integrate with some recent heat mapping that was done for the city by Kappa Strategies. So the overlay of this map displays afternoon heat mapping routes, which could be used to identify specific streets in priority zip codes that could benefit from implementation of strategies such as cool pavement. The integration of best practices and information from the City of Los Angeles, who's conducting extensive cool pavement application throughout the city, could be particularly useful in moving forward with these strategies in San Diego. And this next map displays combined scores of daytime heat susceptibility, cool zone distance, tree canopy cover, and impervious surface cover. So to create this map, I scored all the different variables that I just mentioned and added them up, and then calculated quartiles to rank zip codes from low to high based on these combined factors. And this helps to visualize neighborhoods that are most at risk based on this combination of factors in San Diego. And a potential way to approach strategies in these priority zip codes could be to conduct pilot cooling projects in these neighborhoods, which would include applying a combination of strategies and testing their effectiveness over time. The City of Boston is conducting similar projects in 5 heat-vulnerable neighborhoods, and for that, it consisted of a heat analysis in each neighborhood, extensive community outreach, and then specific recommendations based on those findings and community input. And more information can be found in the Boston Heat Resilience Plan, which just came out in April of this year. So finally, these are my recommendations for improved heat resilience planning and implementation in San Diego. The first being increased collaboration across applicable agencies and stakeholders, including the city and county, on their resilience plans. Next would be to utilize the forthcoming plan integration for resilience scorecard for heat when it is available, which is a scoring method that's developed to understand and improve the integration of heat resilience plans across multiple planning documents. So we could use that throughout the region. Next would be to monitor effectiveness of strategies over time and adjust them as needed. And I'd also like to add maps with air conditioning data, which we're hoping to obtain in a usable format from the 2019 California Residential Appliance Saturation Study. And this can give planners a better idea of heat susceptibility impacts based on lack of air conditioning, and could also be looked at in combination with other factors. Next would be to update the tree canopy and impervious surface cover maps with 2021 LIDAR data, which the city has and is currently in processing, and this can give a more accurate representation of the current state of the city for the tree canopy coverage and impervious surface cover. And then lastly would be to consider points of integration with the forthcoming environmental justice element of the city's general plan. And a background report for this environmental justice plan has already been conducted, which does discuss some heat vulnerability aspects, and the plan is expected to be complete in 2023. So I'd like to thank my Capstone Advisory Committee, Dr. Tariq Ben Marnia, who's my chair, Dr. Muriel Bussell, and Jordan Moore from the City of San Diego. Thank you so much.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name is Brenda Garcia Millán, and so I'm wondering if when you collaborated with the City of San Diego, they talked about the plan, the climate resilient plan was published, right, last fall, and it was approved,
Yes.
but the city still has not developed an implementation and funding plan for this plan, and also for the CAP, the Climate Action Plan. So I'm wondering if, as part of your research, you encounter any examples of other cities or regions that are being successful at implementing these type of plans, because that's the main problem, right? It seems that at this point everybody knows what the solutions are, right? Everybody knows we need more trees, we need more green roofs, and all of these. Everybody knows where the most vulnerable communities are located, but there's always the implementation and funding that fails. So yeah, I'm just wondering if you encounter any examples of success.
Yeah, actually part of the internship that I've been doing with the city is researching implementation pathways for the strategies, so best practices, costs of cities that are implementing similar strategies. So I have found some good examples. Los Angeles is probably the closest one, and they have pretty extensive amount of application of cool pavement, as well as like transforming their streets with tree coverage. So that's a good example, and I do have some information from them on the cost and like more details about how that actually worked. So that is in development right now with the city, but like you mentioned, yeah, the biggest barrier that was identified was funding, time, and staff and leadership. So hopefully with a chief resiliency officer, as well as some additional funding, and there are grant opportunities, that this can really be put on the ground in the next 5 years for the near-term strategies that are identified.
How can the city of Can the city, from a planning perspective, integrate implementation of these strategies with developers on new projects and require them to put funding and implementation of the green canopy or the cool sidewalks, cool parking lots, whatever, into their plans and make that a requirement?
That's a good question. I didn't go into that too much in my research, but I know in terms of like codes for building, there are requirements, and for the cool roofs and green roofs, I know that's something that they'd like to increase requirements for that, but I'm not sure the specifics. I think that there are incentives for developers to have more greening and green strategies in their projects, but in terms of how that would fit in with this, I'm not 100% sure, but definitely a great area to look into.
Sort of on a related note, with the green roof, the green roof concept, the cool roof stuff. Green roofs, of course, are going to obviously need some sort of upkeep, but is there something similar for the reflective sort of white-washed roofs as well? My thought initially is like, well, what about dust and everything build up? Does that affect things? Is it sort of negligible? Do you have any data on that or costs for upkeep?
I don't know specifically. I didn't really cover much of that in my research, but I know that the cool application to roofs is, I think, like around the same as a normal roof, and could even be longer in terms of the type of materials that they're using for the lifespan. And then green roofs, of course, watering the green roof in San Diego, we'd always recommend native vegetation to be used, but I don't know specifically what the maintenance looks like for cool roofs.